Hey guys, and welcome back to another Super Metal Brothers episode. I am Super Metal Brother Matt.
And I'm Super Metal Brother Dane.
We are here to review the latest Opeth album in Cauda, Venenum. Is that right?
I haven't got any better attempt here.
Swedish band with probably a Swedish name. I know this album was recorded twice, one with English vocals,
cool.
one with Swedish vocals.
Great, yeah.
Maybe, but apparently the title is Latin though for Venom in the Tail. So there you go. That should be an inkling into how much thought and work has gone into this album, just in the title alone, and the works of having English and Swedish in this piece of work, Danny. It is a very... Well, Opeth very much are a band who like to push the envelope or stretch the envelope or destroy the envelope and then buy a new one and then, scream into that.
And seal those screams away in the safe that no one else can hear ever again in their lives.
That's right. This is the fourth album, I think, with the new Opeth. And by that, we basically mean no screaming or growls, if you like to call it. A lot of people have a lot of reverence for that. The band is known for having these incredibly long, beautiful songs with mashes of death metal inside of what can be a prog rock album, basically. You know, they've got anything from folk music to jazz and all that. But this album is definitely them stretching the boundaries even more so than other works and pushing the rock. I guess this really is a progressive rock album, isn't it, Danny? There's no point saying that it is a metal. There are inklings that they are a metal band, particularly track 2 with Dignity. Sorry, my apologies. Track 3 with Heart and Hands, which is the closest thing I'm going to get to a metal album on this. I'm going to check off this album, but generally this is a prog rock album, Danny.
Yeah.
And the band's happy to be that now. You know, a lot of fans have wanted it to return, but there is I think the band has matured into a certain sound and they're going for a certain landscape. And it is run by the one Mikhail Feld. He runs the ship here. He does all the writing. You can tell it's all over. His writing's all over this album. And I guess we can get into the album, Danny. What do you think of this band? Or this track album?
Yeah, so this album, it starts off where it's like the classic thing this year. The first track's an intro track. I'm not sure if like record companies are asking for it these days. It seems like every second band we reviewed have done an opening track.
Yep.
At least this one here ties into the theme.
Yeah.
So it tries to actually create a bit of unease and a bit of
atmosphere.
Yeah, atmosphere and mystique to it.
And I will get into why that is towards the end of the review as well. The Garden of Earthly Delights, which funny enough is one of our Adelaide thing, isn't it? We have
we're unearthly though.
With the Unearthly Delights, we have our own Fringe, and there you go.
Yeah.
But then when it kicks into it, you have some R's getting into track 2 with Dignity. It's got some really unusual melodies and those bizarre time signatures, very tricky, and the guitar's heavily featuring in that mix. It really gets a taste of what Opeth really are in essence, and that is something that people who aren't daring, or especially the band not daring to take risks and to push a genre forward, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the one where you get a bit of both. You get a bit of rockiness to it, but also the prog in it. So it's a good second track to get into. So from that really mysterious opening track, this at least gets you a sample more so of what's happen throughout
and even
the album.
like 3 minutes 45 in, or roughly around that, you do get a classic throwback to the 70s sound. And I do think like bands like Deep Purple and Rainbow really come to the forefront here. You know, they're paying homage to these bands, but it definitely doesn't feel like a Rainbow record, or that even Richie Blackmore would have written it. But it does feel like, you know, that there is these inclusions of so many genres, but also there's time periods as well, capturing all that into a bottle as well.
Yeah, you get like the folky sounds thrown in there, which is pretty much Blackmore-y. And
absolutely.
Well, he said one of his favourite albums of all time is Rainbow Rising, so you can see why Blackmore had a big influence on his playing style.
Absolutely, and not to mention obviously other things which we'll get into in a sec. Really going into it before going further, the third track being Heart at Hand really did feel like more of an Iron Maiden influence as well, from those leads and the chord progression and that, and it does have a very punchy feel about it, and it goes for quite a while. In fact, I would argue that this song really has a rock and roll theme for 5 minutes, and then obviously in Opeth fashion there's another 3 minutes extra of progging out, you know, which, to be honest, I really feel like this song does finish 5 minutes out, and those extra 3 minutes are there to make sure that it is an Opeth track length. But it is a great song, you know. Nitpicking aside, it really does feel like this track is fully fleshed out in keeping with that Opeth feel as well, which I must admit is one of my favourite off the album, this track.
And it's starting to add in more of that psychedelic taste of it as well. It's a bit Pink Floyd in this throughout the album as well, you can hear.
Another track which I completely loved as well for different reasons was A Lovelorn Crime as well. It has a very depressing intro going into it as well. The piano is very nice and romantic for the front. Very classically inspired, this track here particularly as well. The verse tugs on the heartstrings, particularly for my own, and there's a lot of strong melodies, and the progression has a certain life and energy, but tragic and hopeful. It's a very much an interesting play going on here. You have a very mournful guitar solo and well in tune with the song, which I think what Mikkel usually does with Opeth tracks. It's never too shreddy. There are some times on this album where you get a bit of sweet picking and stuff, but each part element is working for the song, and I'll say that generally.
Yeah, and they use it here and throughout the album. There's a trick where the bit of intensity, bit of like to drive the song for. He vocalizes and hits on the drum beat, so they do this staccatoing on the drum beat to like crescendo up, and then like break it down again. Which is similar to like Stargazer, going back to the old Rainbow.
The philosophy around those songs, I don't think
it's not the same, but it's
absolutely.
It's using that to like emphasize the passion or the aggression or whatever it is he's trying to get across. He uses that drum beat and the staccatoing to impact you a bit.
And it's even finished off the album as well, just from the time of the highlights. All Things Will Pass. Now, generally Opeth have a certain reverence or respect for an ending of a song as well, particularly songs like Moonlapse Vertigo, and that comes from the Still Life album. If you haven't checked that song out, you're really doing yourself a disservice, and that's, for me, they're pretty much height of Opeth's discography. I gotta be honest, I think for me Still Life is their most beautiful but most heaviest work, and it balances strongly between 9 minutes of folky acoustic and death metal perfectly. But this one here track has an iconic Opeth ending, one that a lot of people have commented on, and one particularly that you have a strong affection for too, Danny.
Yes.
Yeah, All Things Will Pass.
Oh, so so definitely. I think I said Rainbow Stargaze the album, Rainbow Rising the album, if I didn't say it properly. Anyway,
that's
continue
fine.
on here. Yeah, the last one, the track is great. Yeah, like you said, track 9 is kind of like a bit of seems a filler, but then track in, they come back to do that whole classic Opeth thing with mixing like the sad and the aggression and a bit of the rock and the prog all added together. So it was a nice way to finish the album and match the tone of the album as well. Yeah. So it concluded the story quite nicely.
Absolutely. Another thing I just wanted to say about how not only a certain instrumentation stretch, but also about how certain song ideas are stretched out with lots of different colors and different styling, whether it be a stylist choice of the instrumentation or, using those weird time signatures or key signatures, whatever it might be. With Universal Truth, for instance, you have a very folky times intro, but it's also very rockin'. The acoustic stylings of the Garrotter, which is bluesy in nature.
And jazzy
jazzy as well. And when they play homage to the jazzy sound, they've even dialed back the tone on their guitars to really make it feel like that Wes Montgomery / John Scofield style of jazz, where it's, very much very bottom-ended and very softly played. So even when they're now definitely in the Garrotter, the jazz influence is very strong on this. The chromatic lining as well. A 6/4 time signature feel towards the end of the song. And that reminds me very much of guys like Kurt Rosenwinkel, where they've got those R's to help those melodies on the top as well. Very kind of daunting and ghostly, but very effective nonetheless, dude. So as you can tell, generally most of this album I really get into.
Yeah, I was a bit. I bought Heritage. I wasn't a big fan of Heritage because I thought it was too proggy, a bit too slow and a bit too thick. But this one here actually has a balance between the proggy and the slowing it down, but then also a bit of rockiness and a bit of attitude and grunge. At the time, there's vocals to help out a bit of driving with the drums. And they do like the driving drums over like the soft melodies to give you that dichotomy. As well to help create a bit more atmosphere.
One of the reasons why I wanted to review this album is high praise. Particularly one review said from Wall of Sound, which gave it 10 out of 10, saying the best album the band has ever created in the prog era. Will I say it is a perfect album? No. And there's two things. One, particularly, there are some very strange choices, particularly the track Charlatan, which is very interesting kind of math style going on. It very much has a very Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea kind of electric band feel, very chromatic sounding in that. But it just didn't do much for me, particularly as I thought it was a little just, wasn't as much interesting. Kind of where it was just kind of flat the whole time, where the emotional impact for other songs really kind of varied. That one was a bit more whatever. But more importantly, I think the worst and for some people the best track of the album is Continuum, which I actually genuinely thought for 7 minutes 23, being so far back on the album that the band knew it wasn't one of the strongest songs, and particularly it could have probably spent a little bit more time stewing in its own juices, because it lacks a lot of the buzz thing that other tracks do, you know, with that super sexy depressingness or the time tension and that. Song does have it, but it's nowhere near fleshed out as, you know, the first 5 tracks, for instance, Danny.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's tried to be saved by a guitar solo 3 minutes in, but then that's a bit of self-grandeur. It's like that guitar solo wanks on for forever. It really just felt like, you know, let's just get this in there to save it, and it doesn't really do it. And a lot of people attesting that it's the most melodic song off the album that they love, but I can't get behind it. And for me, it's definitely skip, and generally, it's not easy writing these songs, don't get me wrong, so I don't want to be like, especially for the ambitious nature, to try it, but in this particular instance, and I think that's what Opeth's biggest strength and weakness is the over tendency to play out songs for such a long amount of time that sometimes maybe the song just doesn't need it, or doesn't need to go on for that long. What do you think, Danny? What are some of the lower elements of this album that you didn't?
Yeah, that's probably fair to say. Sometimes a bit of that, say, self-indulgence, where they feel like they have to create massive stories. Like sometimes a short story is acceptable. You don't have to like. It's like Lord of the Rings, the last movie. Yeah. It's like one ending is enough. You end up doing like 4 or 5 endings to some tracks, and then just end it. It's fine. Yeah, a 5-minute song is still long. You just accept it.
And even the Universal Truth, there was this ending. He was this refrain that he uses. It's a melody, and it's so sweet that it becomes diabetes-inducing compared to the rest of the tone of the album. Like, I felt a little like. Yeah, a little too nice, you know, and it was really punctuated at the end, where a band sung the song "Demon of the Fall," and you got this line. It doesn't mesh well enough for me, you know. It's like, it was just, you know, minor nitpicks aside, and track 9. Generally, this is a very pleasant album to listen to.
The other issue was when it gets very high. Like he was a bit like. Wispy, a bit, I don't know.
It lacks that emotional gravitas that he's so great at doing, and generally his performance on the album is pretty good.
Yeah,
it's very strong.
For that, he should have even like got maybe a guest muso to come in to do those higher parts.
Maybe just a chick, maybe, or something.
Something like to help it out a bit
without losing the body, you know. But you know, that's again him trying to push that to envelope, see how high and soft he can get without completely alienating the fans, you know. But, you know, overall, this does, even though the sound has sonically changed from where Opeth, but you can argue here that Opeth have always changed their sound, you know? From the Orchid album and to Morning Rise, that had a feel. Then you had from the My Arms Your Hearse, Still Life, Blackwater Park albums, they had their own feel. Ghost Reveries, you know, and then after they would abandon their growling, this seems like the next evolution for Opeth. Whereas I think, like you said, the other album was too proggy for Opeth's nature, and it was more of Mikhail doing what he wanted. This feels like an Opeth album, just matured in the sense that it actually has a lot more elements going on, more focus for how they can make the song not feel like an Opeth formula where it's like heavy, soft, and then heavy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And only once or twice I felt like they were using their own formula that they helped break away from the scene from too, you know?
But they still keep that Opeth sound. Like you still hear these riffs, and you hear, oh, that's an Opeth riff. They still have that like minor sadness feel, which has the blending of like the staccato and the melodic and playing it out. And
I really feel like they achieved that bleakness, and they were going for that with the Morning Rise record. But when they hit My Arms Your Hearse, there was a certain darkness to that album that they would kind of follow with, generally having that certain particular sound, and that is due to unconventional. Not only chord structures, but also the way they would use the notes as well. You know, it just kind of, it's in a minor key, but they do enough to get out of it, like diatonically speaking. So it becomes a little uneasy, and they're perfect, and they've really mastered that. You know, plus with all the other elements adding on top of it, it can be really unsettling, but quite beautiful and peaceful at the same time. And they're crossing that line really well. And this album is at times a real masterpiece. Before I want to finish, I did want to mention that I watched an interview with Cal, and he has a strong respect for records. And the reason why he likes records is because you're actually forced to have a ritual around it. You're forced to leave it on, so you don't skip anything. So you're really immersed in the record. And this album here feels like a record album. It feels like an album that you need to put on an actual vinyl, put it on where the mantelpiece is, put that needle down, and sit through the whole entire thing to really absorb what this is, because I really do feel that he has a writing now, and he always has, but this particular album really reflects that, Danny.
Yeah, I think I don't think a vinyl can play an hour and 5 on both sides.
Yeah.
So he's might be a bit long on. He might be
so you'd have to get up at least once to turn the thing out.
Two album vinyl.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's nice.
But this is really and you could tell that his psychology around music is to write something that you're forced to really sit there and endure and to pay a certain respect to, you know. And if you do that with Opeth, I think you get a return in, because it is nothing really like it. You know, Opeth are a band that's really separated themselves, and they continue to do so, for better or worse, you know, and that really comes down to the individual. But Macau is one of those brilliant minds in heavy metal and in music, to be honest. You know, he's transcended past just being a heavy metal artist.
It's a big risk.
It is, absolutely.
Like, piss off your fans and come say, no, I'm old and I want to do what I want to do.
I think Opeth fans have always wanted something different, you know, and the hardcore fans, you know, and like he said in another interview, how the growls, people want the growls, and he has such a respect for the fans who want that, because they loved it, and he feels that as a way of saying, like, thank you, even though they're not, they kind of are, because they're like, look, when you were going to return to it, we loved it so much, but those days might just be over for him, and that's totally fine, because they're still getting good music. And it is bleak, it is depressing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what he does well with this album to create that bleakness atmosphere, he does a lot of these like choirs and that weird vocalizing on it, and also like uses of like audience noises, like laughter and clapping applause. It's very like David Lynch like feel to it. Like if you see like on the Twin Peaks or Mulholland Drive, where it seems like he has like a second story over the one story. Like, is this real? Is this fantasy type? Actually, what's actually happening at this moment. So he's done well to create that. And also you could say like in the opening track, it has that weird synth like organ sound, which is very similar to like Stranger Things opening. Again, is that like creating another like weird dystopia, or another weird type of second reality that this album's counteracting against? I don't know, like depends how deep you want to look into things, but it's quite it's quite that our atmospheric and those tones, all the subtleness of it helps out as well. And it was good that he did this album in both Swedish and English. Like I can't remember the last time a band has actually done
Iconium Astrum. They released it previously in their own native tongue, but then they did it to maybe probably expand the audience or whatever, but this band's already got a fairly big stretch, and you know,
I mean, it would have been a little bit more money, of course, doing both. I'm not sure if they released twin CDs on English, and I'm not sure how it's done, but it was nice of them to do that and pay homage to where they came from and their native tongue, and it would be nice little touch for them probably as well to do, like saying I don't have to do English now, I can do my native language, which is nice, and it's a nice touch.
Overall, Danny, your final score?
I will give it probably not as high as you. I'm giving it 7.5. I'm
going to give it an 8.5. I don't consider it a perfect album, unfortunately. The track 9, like I was saying, really kind of took me out of it, and I was a little just what could have been maybe to have the perfect album. But the amount of ambition and creativity is so far into these guys' discography to keep pushing that boundary forward, I have a lot of respect for. The songs here are great, and they really do feel quite immersive, and the more you look into it, the more you're going to find, like a good thriller or a good book, you know. It's only I think 7.5 is a little bit harsh, absolutely.
It's quite fair.
But, you know, it's not the first time we've disagreed on that, but it is a high... I think fans will be happy with this for sure, and even the new fans can get on board. Although I'd imagine this is more for an aging demographic. I don't think the youth are into, they're spending their money on wallets into it. I'd like to think they would be, but I don't know. This one's a tough one for.
Yeah, it has a lot of nostalgia there, but it also has like little inclinations of like newer bands like Mastodon and even Ghost. There, I say there's a bit of that into the album. I know that might upset people saying Ghost because people hate Ghost, but not everybody. But there are moments where there's a resemblance there. So they're kind of blending the line between old and new and different styles. So it's all good. And in the words of Opeth, can we dictate a life with dignity? Foul agenda, corrupt in secrecy.
Layers upon layers. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Tune in to us if you guys want to know a certain album, our thoughts on, make sure you let us know, and we're happy to take it on. We are coming to the end of the year, though, so be quick because we will be doing our top 10 and top maybe 5 or 10 of the worst albums. This year's been an interesting year. We'll talk about that another time.
Maybe it's not really worst albums, just disappointing albums.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe. Until then, though, I am Super Metal Brother Matt.
And I'm Super Metal Brother Dane.
We have been the Super Metal Brothers. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.